If you have a brand, people have an idea who you are. If you don't have one, they don't know who you are, and it might not translate with a payout.
Hello, welcome to the second Cozy Book Nook Zoom podcast. It's a writer's talk show. Here we explore book promotion and help you grow your author's platform. I'm your host, Christina Goebel at Love Golden Heart. Laban and I created Cozy Book Nook to help authors expand their platforms. Your author platform includes your book, your website, your social media presence, speaking engagements, and more than that. Let's commit to promoting our books and growing as authors every week. Today we've asked O'Cyrus, which is the _Cyrus, that's what's spelled with a Y, _ for a long form interview because he helps other authors build their brands and develop their social media. O'Cyrus is a founder of O'Cyrus Inc. Publishing, which has the slogan, I love this slogan, find your dream, live in your purpose, and help the world. O'Cyrus is also the podcast host of the Authors Lounge, and he has won 17 writing awards. I'm quite excited to have you here today because you're an author, publisher, podcaster. I was just thinking about brand recently. What can an author do without it? Do we need it? And so I was looking at other authors' websites, such as Stephen King, James Patterson, and other authors, J.K. Rowling, Julia Quinn from the Bridgerton series. And when I was looking at theirs, obviously Julia Quinn, you can see that she's very well branded for her time period. Stephen King, you can see some red font, black font, a lot of black on the website. James Patterson is a lot of like a cozy light blue. He's doing a podcast too, J.K. Rowling was surprisingly homey. There wasn't any pretension there. I guess that's the message that she wanted to send across. But do we need it? I think one of your arguments is that we do need it, and we're going to explore why we might need author branding for authors. O'Cyrus, can you tell us about yourself a little bit, your writing, and why you got into publishing?
Oh, of course. Well, first, thank you. Thank you both for having me, and I'm looking forward to, yes, ma'am, for being on your platform, on this show. One of the questions, okay, so how did I get into writing? How did I get into publishing?
Well, back up just a little bit before that. I want to know a little bit about you're a writer. And so definitely want to know about you, about your writing. You mentioned your awards, and then why you got into publishing.
Oh, okay. Yes, so a little bit about me. I'm O'Cyrus, and I have 3 children, married. I'm in the active duty military Air Force. I got into writing really just because I had a lot to say, and I wanted to be able to share that just in general before I even thought of it becoming a book or writing in book format. I just always loved the idea of what writing could do, and I had been writing for decades. I believe my mother told me I started writing around 4 or 6. I know there's a bit of a gap, but I was a child. I didn't begin to go about it seriously until maybe 2007, 2008, when I started like writing little articles that didn't necessarily matriculate and go anywhere. In the book publishing world, I started doing that in 2020. I started out with research first on, do I want to do the traditional publishing route or do I want to do self-publishing route? So that's a little bit of a rabbit hole, but that goes to the why did I get into, book publishing, which was I wanted to house my own book. Once I learned that unless you are a celebrity or some sort of an influencer or a public figure, a politician, someone who already has some sort of credibility behind your name, that if you go the traditional publishing route and you manage to go through the querying, you get an agent, and then you get a book deal and you get your book out, you as the author are still responsible for the marketing. Even if you are of that status, you will still need to do some marketing, but they meaning that the publishing house will do it on your behalf because they know that. You had mentioned J.K. Rowling and Stephen King. They know if we put J.K. Rowling in this or Stephen King on this cover, just with their name, we can push it out. We can make all the ads, social media ads, broadcasting ads all over the news and morning shows. We can get that booked for this person because we know people will buy it. But as a self-published author, you don't have that same luxury unless, of course, you have that status already and you decide to kind of like Taylor Swift, for example. Taylor Swift self-published her book, and And everybody in the world who listens to music has some sort of idea of who Taylor Swift is. And so she didn't have to go that route, and she can control the narrative of her books. So for me, I wanted that same style of the control of the narrative, because I understand that books go through a certain process, and I had specific messages that I wanted to share. And so I decided that if I do it myself and I learn the business aspect of it, and I also go about it in knowing that, okay, if I'm traditionally published, I'm still going to have to do a lot of the marketing. That's no different than in self-publishing, given my status, given where I am at that, given where I was at that time. And so I decided to get into publishing because I wanted to share certain stories that I can have complete control of. That includes the team whom I hired, from editors to illustrators, proofreaders, to the whole networking piece, and the whole marketing piece is a different aspect. But I just wanted to be able to control my stories ultimately.
Yeah, I was wondering if you did it yourself. So you have a team, which is a great way to go. I need to back up, guys, just a little bit to introduce my co-host, Laban and Bololo Esquire at Inspired by Laban, and who's our co-host. And Laban is coming in from Kenya.
I'm in a coastal town in Kenya. I'm glad I'm here, and we're glad to have O'Cyrus on here on the show.
That's awesome. So Osiris was just talking about the self-publishing. Well, actually becoming a publisher, and it's a little bit more than self-publishing because he wanted to help other people be able to publish their books. So you wanted to ask Osiris about his podcast and how he got started in that?
I give him credit for at least trying. Kenya versus the United States and the connections, his constant of wanting to get on and do these things all the way from over there on in our times, well, more like more of your times, but just with the U.S., knowing that it may come with connection issues, I think is really admirable of him. To at least try. I'd be more than happy to answer his question when he comes back in. And I saw that he probably got disconnected.
Okay. You and I, we were having a discussion and we were talking about many things. And one of the things that we really kind of landed on is that you were discussing the importance of branding for authors. I was swayed to your side on that because you were talking about branding even before the book is published. And yes, that is unexpected. So can you tell us how you're working with new authors, you're working with young authors, you're trying to help them get noticed in the world. What are you having conversations about? How do you teach an author how to brand?
Yes, no, that's a wonderful question. And I didn't necessarily know the importance of it until I was doing my research. And, many things I suppose we need to be backed by research. I don't have like a stat sheet here or anywhere I could point to anyone other than just from what I've done my research on and then people who I've spoken to. But just building a brand is tricky because that in itself requires an entirely different focus that is not so far apart from writing, but it's far apart from the writing aspect because you're not necessarily focused on writing. Now, to answer your question about how do I really get like the young authors, for example, and how do I help them too, like even with the brand. So I'll use Vani Tawari as a perfect example. And she was a young author that I met, and she actually presented to me with fantasy. She came to me as an author who wrote in the fantasy genre. She was stuck on just, I don't know where the story is going to go. I keep running into these roadblocks, X, Y, and Z. And so I hadn't, we had spoken for many times. And at some point I learned that maybe you need to step away from that story entirely. If you've been working on it for some years and you're stuck here. So I would suggest just kind of stepping away from it. And in stepping away from it, she regathered some thoughts. And then she learned that, hey, I wrote a poetry book, which completely threw me way off guard because she came to me some months later and told me she did a poetry book. But then I told her, okay, let's do this. I highly encourage you seek out other authors and the community for poetry. Go and see where the poets lie. Go and see what they're doing. Go and find out and build yourself around that. Present yourself as a poet and brand yourself around the idea of poetry. If you're going to do fantasy down the road, then we could tackle that later. But right now, you know that you want to do poetry. So the first question that I ask authors is, what's your message? It's not some people, I just want to write a book and I want to be famous. I'm like, hey, cool. I'm not knocking that idea. Like, but why do you want to even be famous? Okay, cool. You want to be able to have your message reach a broader audience and you feel like having some sort of celebrity status will be helpful. That's cool. I've spoken to celebrities and that's actually their very reason for wanting to have that sort of status is because their reach is far greater than what it would be if they didn't have that status at all. So, okay, so now what's the actual message that you're trying to say? Let's wipe away everything else. What's the message that you are trying to convey? You want to be able to help people in this demographic. Let's say those who have special needs. Let's say Vonnie did not write a poetry book about special needs, but let's just say so it won't be confusing, she decides, I want to write a poetry book specifically geared towards teenagers with special needs. And I'm like, okay, so now you actually have a target. You know you want to speak to them about that. So now build around that. You can be an advocate for somebody who wants to speak on behalf of those who have special needs, and start branding it, like starting with a title, like, hey, in your bio, you can put something about author, also like special needs advocate, high school counselor, assistant, or something along those lines. And you start to build off of that. So when people click on your page, they identify you immediately as, oh, this person is a representative of like special needs. They are an advocate for it. And so automatically that's going to tell people that, okay, they are either an expert in this or they have some sort of whereabout with this. And so I encourage them to build around that and to also connect with the audience of that particular genre. Like social media is so big now. And I always just encourage them meaning the authors, to start to just build. Even if you're writing the book and it's not even finished, you know what genre you're going to be in. Just go in and start just adding people and following people who are in your genre. And then eventually, start commenting on their page, build a connection with them, and show genuine appreciation for what they are doing, their work, their posts, their videos, and start talking to them. Granted, I know back, some years ago, this wasn't a thing. And the real way that you would need to connect with people was just to go out in person, go to different conferences or go to festivals, and you meet and greet and you do it there. But the times are much different, and many people have gravitated towards social media. And so that's what I encourage the authors to do, is just to build the audience, know what you're writing for, know who you're writing for. And sometimes you don't know, but as long as you have an idea of, this is the message behind my story and this is a genre. As soon as you know that genre, start finding people that's in that genre and build an audience around that. So when your book comes out, you can then say, so I have a book that's coming out in X, Y, and Z, and let's push, and people will get on board. So with Vonnie, we did exactly that months before her book was published. I met her in February of 2024, and she wrote her book, I think in the summer of 24, and we published it in February of 25. Entire year's worth of a process. But during that time, she stopped what she was doing. She figured it out, and we built an audience around it. And then she became a bestseller on Amazon. And I know that's not a New York Times bestseller, but a bestseller status is still a big thing for anyone to have that sort of accolade. And so I know that it was a bit of a long-winded question, but I thought to give a really thorough breakdown of how I did it with her. And that's generally my process with other authors.
Well, a little bit more of the breakdown now. So what does her brand look like? So I think brand is too abstract for most people. So we're like, oh, okay, build your brand. And people are like blank slate in their head. I mean, they don't know what that looks like. So what does it look like for your clients when they have a brand versus when they didn't have a brand?
Oh, okay. No, that's actually a great question as well. So when they didn't have a brand and it was just, hey, I'm an author, I'm writing a book, can we push it there? They were less likely to get buys. They were less likely to really have a reach to people because no one knew who they were. Maybe aside from like their friends and their family members, it's harder to really drive in some sort of revenue if there's not a face affiliated with it. Like people watch your podcast and they listen to your podcast and they know if she puts a book out, we already know what she represents. She's an advocate for this business as a writer, and we're going to take to her because we know that she knows what she's talking about. You build more of a trust with that. And I think people may confuse branding with many things, but I think at its core, it's just who are you and what do you represent? It's kind of like if you look at different slogans, I got into the habit of looking at different logos and slogans and what does it represent? And just for my authors, the ones who don't have a brand or don't realize it, because as an author, you are your own brand. But when they don't know that and they just write the book, they really have a hard time with connecting it to readers or connecting to even other authors because they don't know who you are. People vibe with authors who they they connect with. And then they become a supporter is just like going to Target or going to Walmart versus going to a store that just opened up. Yes, that small business is going to bring in some revenue, maybe local revenue, bring in locals for revenue or friends and family. But Walmart and Target, you just see the symbol and okay, I can go there. I can shop for clothes. I can shop for food. I can shop for electronics. I can shop for books. There's already an establishment there versus a small business that doesn't really have any sort of credibility on a mainstream. They're still trying to figure it out. And that's how I view it when it comes to being an author. You have to know what you want to say, and you have to also know, like, what are you writing about and what are you writing for? And the same aspect as Target and Walmart is apparent what they're doing. And a smaller bookstore not smaller bookstore, a smaller, store that's in the same category as Walmart or Target may be trying to figure it out. And so I just think, like, for not knowing what they are doing, I try to help them without being forceful. I don't want to force them. If I'm going to help you, I'm not going to force you by any means to say, you need to have a brand. Like, I'm not going to do that. But it can be intimidating, to even consider the idea of, okay, I got a brand, I got a market, I got to do, because it's a business. The industry is a business. And I think a lot of people run into a brick wall when they're trying to sell books or they may make posts on social media. It's like, please, purchase my material. This is why you should. But it may not likely be as effective unless they know who you are. You got to put yourself out there and you just have to be genuine. It can't always be about selling a product, as it should be more about, this is who I am as a person. And so I know that also was a bit long-winded as well, but the brand versus not having a brand. If you have a brand, people have an idea who you are. If you don't have one, they don't know who you are, and it might not translate with a payout.
That's pretty good. I mean, the brand, when I think of your brand, it's very clear and it's consistent with finance. It's very clean branding, neutral tones and things like that. When I'm looking at all of your books, there's some consistency within your field, right? And I think that's something to examine. Like when we talk to people, gentlemen, when we talk to people about branding and about creating their brand, what do we say about color, about font, about how the website looks, about how the book covers look? I mean, there's some artistry involved in all of this, isn't there? What do you think?
Is that for LeBon or for me? Sorry.
For both of you.
Oh, okay, I'd like to hear LeBon.
You see, some of the things that come out when you want to be a brand is basically you want to have two things, yeah? One of them is credibility, and the other one is visibility, because there are very many competitors in the market. So you want to distinguish yourself from them. And branding is what now makes this come out very clearly. I think this is what you've been trying to share, O'Cyrus. Once you brand yourself, it is things that people are able to identify you with. When they're looking for good graphics, they're going to find that in your book. If they're looking for some kind of content, if it's finance, for example, if you're a finance professional, then that needs to come out very clearly. If you're doing Christian books, then the theme has to be very clear, loud and clear, so that, there's no going in between. It is very clear, it's very profound, it comes out very clearly, and this is now what separates you from other players. If you're doing video, then again, they gotta be high quality. So if you brand yourself with that, then people know, they pick up that book, then they probably it's gonna resonate. It's the same way you present itself, There's people decide 10 things about you before they even meet you, before you even open up your mouth. So how you brand yourself is very key in how the market will respond to you, so to speak.
No, I like the breakdown very much. Colors matter a lot. You just to kind of get back to it, colors matter, and it matters more so because you want it to be able to to be used as an identifier, even as much as the name. What's the colorization behind it, and what do those colors represent? Blippi, for example, right? Like, I'm a father of 3, and when my oldest, Abel, my 9-year-old, when he was like 3 years old, somehow went to Blippi. Blippi was the guy. He was the chosen one during that time frame. He had a distinct color pattern. It was blue and orange, and it wasn't just a regular blue or a regular orange, like a dull color. It was bright. It was a bright blue and a bright orange, and he had those bright orange pants on, and with with the straps and the glasses and the hat with the different color blue and orange pattern with it, and with that color frame, orange framed glass. I think it was orange, or maybe it was a blue framed glasses. I can't quite remember. It's been a while, but nonetheless, he had an entire build of what his presentation looked like. Then his name as well. The way that the word Blippi was written, it was written in orange, which coincided with his color pattern. And that wasn't by accident. That was with thorough research. And I've done research as well, right? Where if you are looking at the colors, what do the colors represent? Naturally, right? If you're going to just go based off of a particular color, like you can look at what psychology studies show the effectiveness of these colors. Are people more prone to trust you? If you go out on a date, right? Like you're with a young lady and you go out on a date and she's wearing like a red dress versus wearing a white dress or blue dress. That red is indicative of making a statement, a power statement. Same with the lipstick color or even the color of a flower. If a gentleman is going to give a flower to their significant other, what's the color of that flower? What does it represent? You wouldn't give a red rose to your best friend unless there was a meaning behind it. And generally that red rose is reserved for a significant other, not just a friend, unless there's something else. But generally speaking, it's more reserved. Like just think Valentine's Day, like I'm going to give you a bouquet of red flowers. I bring up those flowers, or I bring up the red dress, or I bring up like Blippi, because colors matter. And what does that color indicate about you as a person? I like color. I'm a super colorful guy. And so a lot of the things you'll see with me, it's just a variety of bright colors. There's a common theme in my children's books that I write is that the colors were bright and it's vibrant and it's in your face, because I understand just through psychology of how children resonate with bright colors. It's not that it's just colorful as much as it is bright and colorful. And so Blippi, he took to blue and orange, and blue is more so it's trusting. People who see you in that color blue are more prone to trust you. You don't seem to be someone who is going to be off. I believe, I can't, please don't quote me on this tone. I didn't wear this shirt because I was thinking about, a certain tone or a certain brand or anything like that. But I believe like colors like earthy tones, like this, forest green. Actually, don't quote me on it. I don't want to sound ignorant with it because I can't quite remember. But I do know that blue is a trustworthy type of a color. So to get back to the color concept is, what does that represent for your brand? Some people just put their name in black because they don't have an idea of what they want their name to look like, and that's fine. But colors do play a pivotal role, not just in the branding piece of it, but the marketing aspect as well. And this conversation about branding could probably confuse many authors or people in general who don't know about it. And this might cause their head to kind of do this and twist and turn the cogs. And I don't even want to do that. And that is perfectly okay, because you don't have to worry about the branding at all. But if you're trying, I won't even say trying, if you want to elevate and you want to be taken in a more serious light, not that you have to be or like all serious, but if you want to be taken in a more serious manner as somebody that we can go to, that branding is important, because that's what's going to help sell. It's not even as much as selling to make money as it is selling yourself, to be featured on different shows or to be like questioned, because they need to know who you are. That's all I'll add to LeBron said. I really liked what he said.
And then this is just basically understanding the color psychology for authors, yeah? O'Cyrus, you came on here today with green, and green speaks loudly about raw harmony, nature, and especially for environmental authors, yeah? They usually go with that thing that green goes very well with them. Also wellness, as well as spiritual, yeah? They tend to go with green, yeah? Then you have very powerful colors like blue. And you're going to see a lot of big brands here. They do have that color blue. And the psychology just behind it is that blue kind of like reflects trust. There is sort of professionalism in it and an intelligence, yeah? And that's why you see great businesses. They do pick up that. You're going to see a lot of nonfiction and self-help authors here. They're always settled for blue. Then also red is a passionate color. You were talking about one of your kids who loves that. You can see that it brings out urgency. There's also energy. And then especially it's ideal for thrillers and romance, as well as action-packed books of that red really resonates with it very hard. And then another color is quite dominant in terms of branding is black. And
Mm-hmm.
black would usually express power, sophistication, elegance, this kind of thing. And you can see that lots of luxury brands, they tend to have that. And we already have green, and maybe another color that you will see not very often is yellow,
Mm-hmm.
But then again, something that it reflects, which is creativity, some kind of warm optimism, and that goes very well with motivational writing, children books. It comes out very well. And then we also have a color like purple. That's also associated with luxury and creativity and wisdom as well. So when you're looking at some of these historical books, fantasy, spiritual books, you will kind of come across that purple theme. That's what it ministers out there. And last but not least, is orange. Orange is a very powerful color you'll see in lots of political parties that like using that. It's a good way to brand because it brings out friendliness, it shows your passion with people, enthusiasm, adventure, And for authors, it's very great for marketing, coaching, as well as motivational books. I can speak about one more color, the last one, which is white. And white, as it is, it just stands out for clarity or minimalism. Fine. You're a minimalist.
I know when I was looking at my branding, when I first started, and that first book was coming out and it did have spirituality in it. And so I thought I don't want to obscure the meaning. And so I chose white. It was clarity. It was like the absence of any other emotion, just clarity. And then golden heart, the metal, it was coming from the metal gold and it was meaning something precious. But when that transitioned into social media, we didn't have gold hearts and we had yellow hearts. And I thought, do I want a yellow heart? Well, I thought pink and red, they seemed to, even the orange, they were sending another message. I wanted a message that said, love everyone, that I sent the heart to anyone and they wouldn't think anything but that I was being friendly. And so I think that's what we're trying to get everyone to think about. I'm thankful that you did that breakdown, LeBon, because I could tell that you've worked with people who are just beginning on this and they're like, I don't understand color theory. I don't understand what the colors mean. But you don't have to. That's the way the art works. You can pick the color that you like the most, that you use all the time, and just work that into your work and see how that color, or at least a hue of that color. So like maybe it wouldn't be bright red if you're writing fantasy because red is a symbol of horror. And so if you didn't have horror in your fantasy, that bright red would be inappropriate. Maybe you could tone it down to a more natural red and then work with that within yours. So that's a mistake I made on my fantasy novel because the skies are red. There's a lot of fighting and stuff. But when I'm sending out a red ad, I may be sending the wrong message that it's a horror fantasy and it's not. It's an epic fantasy. And so, but there's branding for the books, right? And there's branding for the author. And so what we're talking about today is branding for the author. Like what would the colors be in your social media and your website? What's your background? So then you notice mine today that I created this here for the show so that I would have a background that said, Christina's got a book, Golden Heart. She does a podcast. She loves books. It's all there. Even the plants over there, the cozy sofa. It's got me in that background. And that's what we should be able to see very quickly because you don't have a lot of time on social media to get that attention. So, but we did have questions about social media, right, LeBon? You wanted to ask him about his social media?
Yes, O'Cyrus.
Yes, sir.
In social media, I see the way you branded yourself, kind of like it's very clear what you do, and it shows the kind of engagement that if you're interviewing an author, yeah?
Yes, sir.
What is expected. So how have you been able to come up with such a strong brand in terms of social media? Because it has a very strong presence. It is very noticeable. And with that, you kind of like preempt whoever is coming on board. This is, what the firing line would look like. How are you able to come with that?
I think it just came down to through trial and error of just kind of learning. But I think
That's one of the questions. That's it. But two is, what is your response to it in terms of the audience?
okay, so that varies depending. It's interesting, right, with it, because like once I found what my message was, which ultimately was to just help the younger generation of writers. Once I actually truly identified that, then everything else clicked, and I put it. But the platforms is the unique entity because you have to learn the platform and how to utilize your message on that platform specific. So like YouTube in itself can be a beast because it's broken down into like live streams, into the shorts, and to the actual videos. And so then you have to learn within in the world of YouTube, where does your message fit? How can you make your message align with the different formats of YouTube? And that's just YouTube. Then you have Facebook. You use Facebook, which I don't use Facebook, but then there's also X, or people may recognize it as Twitter. Then we have Instagram, and now Threads, and TikTok, and Blue Sky, and Substack, and LinkedIn. And there's so much that goes into, I don't even know where to start. I ended up speaking into an influencer like a couple of years ago. At the time, I think he had like around like 8 million subscribers, like collectively. And the thing that he said he did was kind of like created like a funnel. Was he went to all the social medias and starting from one to the next, just same message across the board. Change up a few things to kind of fit the social media platform and kind of go from there. For me, I ended up like, for example, on Instagram, I like to include music a lot. So in the promotional ads or posters that I make, I try to make it to where my personality is still within the confines of that promo poster. And so my stuff tends to have different color patterns. It's not just like a plain color, not to discriminate or anybody who uses it. Just for me, I like different color patterns, which doesn't really say much because I'm wearing green and my background's green. But generally I wear different colors when I'm like on camera. But I learned that Instagram is a platform where people come to see pictures. They don't necessarily come to watch shorts. They don't necessarily come to watch long-winded videos. They just want something quick. I love the pictures. I love how flashy it is and the engagement, and then kind of move on from there. And TikTok is more like an entertainment platform. People use it they'll scroll through unless you're doing something outlandish. The likelihood of like me just talking is probably going to get glanced over because it's not so fitting for what that platform as a whole represents. You'll still get people to buy into you and to listen to you, not in the same aspect as you would on X, which brings me to X and how you have to promote on X and the messages and the hashtags that you put on there, and learning what works on X that didn't necessarily work on Instagram. Instagram allows you to use music with your promotional, like with your pictures, but you can't get that on X. So you have to get creative. You can also at max post up to 4 pictures on X versus if you're posting a post on Instagram, you can post like 15 of them. And I don't know the max number, but I know it far exceeds 4. And so that might also change the narrative as to what are you trying to convey. You need to pick out like the 4 strongest pictures if you're going to do it on X. So when people scroll, they see the message. And also what I've noticed about X is that people like to read a lot. They are cool with reading longer posts versus Instagram where they don't want to read it at all. They'd rather just see the picture and the picture tells the story. And so once I started to like learn the science behind these platforms like LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is different. And I also learned that the audience with LinkedIn is more senior based, not senior in age, but like senior in experience. Like I'm seeing 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, and that I'm not really seeing any youth in any aspect. That audience generally is on Instagram and on TikTok. The more seasoned ones, business professionals, I see them on LinkedIn and I see them on X. So my message as a whole is I realize that my audience is not everywhere, but they're in every one of the platforms that I utilize the most. There is an audience there that can help me with my message, which is to help the younger generation. X has people who are parents, who have teenagers who they're trying to help. Same with LinkedIn. LinkedIn has a lot of business professionals who are willing to partner with me so I can spread that message. And Instagram is where I see the most engagement because my audience are the younger demographics, like 18 to 25. And that's where most of them are. It's with Instagram. So like once you find your message and you find how to tie in all of the platforms to really serve your message, that's how you can become somebody who can be on top, not necessarily like on top of the social media, but you can be a prominent figure within it once you learn how to utilize these different aspects of it. And so it's been really helpful because I know I can't go to LinkedIn and promote children's books, but I can go to LinkedIn and look for people who are librarians, look for teachers, look for principals. I can look for entrepreneurs who are are focused on wanting to build a business around that. And I say, hey, I have this. Let's collaborate and let's come up with something. And then I take that collaboration from LinkedIn and I put it in a message format that I can push out on X to the audience of other people who like to read and who like to socialize, people who like to be more informed. And then I take that same format and I put it on Instagram, and the message is for the audience on my Instagram. Look, it's a constant cycle. And in YouTube, you don't know what you're going to get on YouTube. You just kind of put it on there and see what sticks. I get the least amount of engagement, ironically enough, from YouTube. But I say ironically enough because YouTube used to be the spot where people go all the time. But a lot of my audience, they actually reside in Instagram. And I'm sure if I were to do TikTok, I could probably find a creative way to do it. I haven't explored the TikTok style of how to tie in my message with their videos because I understand it's a video based. And I know that unless I have somebody working with me to create those videos, it's not likely going to do it. And you got to be consistent with TikTok. And so I'm not on that platform. But I know that was a bit excessive of a breakdown, but I thought it was important to point out the differences between the social media platforms and how to tie it in. And so for me, and I know you had a question earlier about the Authors Lounge, and I could talk about that a little later, but my message for the Authors Lounge, I'm able to tie in every, not every platform, but most of them to be able to serve the message to help the people.
Yeah, LeBron, he was referring to the question that you had about how he got into podcasting.
Yeah, sure. What is the nemesis? What informs the decision before you coming up with the podcast?
Yes, for me, it was tricky for me to figure out at first because I knew I just wanted to do something. I had seen other like YouTubers at the time create just podcast platforms by just talking about whatever they wanted to talk about. And I knew I had a lot to say and I just didn't know what I wanted to talk about. And so I eventually just said, you know what, I'm just going to create a podcast. My first one was called O'Cyrus Inc. Podcast. You wouldn't know anything about it based off of the title, but I didn't know either. I was just I'm just going to try and kind of go from there because I got tired of just waiting on the perfect idea to come to mind. I realized that's not actually going to happen until you're doing it and you're going through the mud and you're getting it in. And then the ideas come as you're doing it. And then the message eventually comes. And it may not, but you have to actively pursue it to see what it is. I just knew I wanted to talk about certain things. At the time, Osiris Inc. podcast was just a podcast where I was focused on self-help. I was focused on putting in like audiobooks. I was also talking about book publishing, but it wasn't a direction, and I didn't realize that. And so then I stepped away, came back, and then I put my face on the cover, and then still talking about more or less the same thing. And then I stepped away again. Then I turned it into an entertainment platform. Then I renamed it to Live with O'Cyrus because people were coming in. I was playing music like it was a radio station, and I was still talking about those things. And it was kind of, I didn't know again then. And then I had the Authors Lounge, the first edition of the Authors Lounge, which was audio based. And that's why I kind of started interviewing people, but I was still talking about book publishing. But I was also running 2 or 3 other like podcasts actively, and it didn't mesh well at all. So I completely stopped with the podcast. And it wasn't until late, like November, I was getting this burning sensation to bring back the Authors Lounge, but painted in a different picture, which was to put my face quite literally on it, meaning through video. And I remember saying that, okay, I know I want to help people. Specifically, I want to help teenagers because a lot of my audience, my demographic really is 18-25, followed by 26 to 35, and then 12 to 17. That's kind of what my average is. And the majority of my audience, I think it's like 60% are women, 40% are men. And that's much different than what it was like 2 years ago on YouTube, where it was like the most demographic was like 80% men, 20% women. And so I think that change came because of the platforms that I was utilizing. I don't know the science behind it, but I think that my messages were resonating just collectively. And when I brought back the Authors Lounge, I knew what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted a message to help out the younger generation. And at first I wanted to help them teach themselves about branding because it was hurtful to see so many new authors, so many new people get into a position where they put their heart and their soul into their books, but it didn't really materialize into anything. And I knew that it was likely because they weren't putting themselves out there in an effective way. And so I figured if I just I have this platform that can help them learn the game of how to brand themselves. If I bring in other guests, they can share their experience as well on how they got to the point that they got to, as a writer. And the author's lounge can be it can be confusing because the author's lounge might be indicative of, oh, the author has to be an author for books. But no, it's quite the opposite. It's if you're a writer, right? I like the idea of the author's lounge because this is where authors come, which is true. I have songwriters come on to the show. I have screenwriters who are coming on to the show. I've also had like Draft to Digital. They came onto my show and their episode's going to air in a couple of weeks. And I'm bringing on people who can speak to the world of writers or the business behind writing, the business behind book publishing, the business behind being in the entertainment industry as a screenwriter. But it all comes back being a writer. And as a writer, because it's such an art form, I want different experts to come in and share their experience to help the younger generation of writers. And once I realized that was actually my message, everything took off. And I went to San Francisco and I went to a conference, the San Francisco Writers Conference, and I was on stage with 20 people, well, 19 others, but I was the only one on that stage that didn't present themselves. Everyone was like a publisher, or they were like traditional publishers, or they were literary agents. They had status like across the board. I think collectively there were maybe over 200 years experience on stage alone with just their experience within the book publishing business. And I've been in the business for 5 years, but I'm not a traditional publisher. I'm not an agent or anything like that. So my message that I shared with them, hey, I'm not even going to pretend like I have that experience, but this is my message. And I shared my message of the Authors Lounge with that audience. And it resonated with many of them because you know what? So many people are focused on business, and that's a good thing. Focus on business because I am too. But sometimes it is easy to forget how to help people with a simple message. Like this video right here that we're doing, this podcast, doesn't cost anything but time. You're just the time and attention. That's it. And I wanted people to come on board to really drive home that message. And so I've been really fortunate to get some producers who are coming onto the show or who have been on the show, executives from Hollywood or different writers. I had a Grammy winner on my show a couple weeks ago, and then I had Gloria Loring, who's Robin Thicke's mom, and I didn't talk to her about it. Those might not know Robin Thicke is like this huge celebrity across the world, but I managed to I got that interview and talked to her. But I also still talk to the authors. Like on Monday, I have Flocka M, who's my 15-year-old niece. She's coming on because her book is coming out on Monday, and we have a whole package deal of how we're going to present that. So just because I'm getting people with these statuses, I never forgot that this is who I'm doing it for. I'm getting those people on to help legitimize the platform as, oh, if he's getting people like that, that message must be something worth listening to. And I've done podcasts in the past where if you get anybody on there with some sort of credibility, it helps. I was interviewing this guy, Andy Ross, a literary agent, but he was the store owner of Cody's Books, which was in Berkeley, California. And that bookstore was a trailblazer for bookstores from the 70s up to the 2000s. And he's had people like Bill Clinton there, the president, Jimmy Carter, he's had Muhammad Ali, and those are just a few that I can come to mind just right off the bat. And so he was big time, but he turned into a literary agent once he shut the store down. And I had him on the show earlier in the month, and his knowledge is just ridiculous. Just the amount of information that they provide to feed in to the community. I'm trying to teach people how to fish. I'm not trying to give them the fish. Well, that's what the Authors Lounge with O'Cyrus represents. It represents a place where we are helping the younger generation of writers. Sorry, I don't even know what time it is. Okay, cool.
So he had asked us to be mindful of time. So yeah, that's where we're at. That was a wonderful summation of what you're doing. And we really appreciate the work that you're doing with young authors and kind of bridging the gap between young authors and experienced people in all fields who can contribute to their understanding of the world and help them get ahead and achieve their dreams. Thank you everyone for tuning in to the second Cozy Book Nook Zoom edition with me, Christina Goebel, and with Laban Mbalolo Esquire. If you valued this time with Cyrus, please leave comments on YouTube when it's available and follow him on all the platforms. So Cyrus, stay tuned to the next Cozy Book Nook Zoom author interview, and you can still find the original Cozy Book Nook on X Spaces each Tuesday at noon Eastern Time. Thanks again to you, Cyrus, for sharing about author branding and for your service to others. Stay cozy, friends.